Starting up this new Agent I Hacked series has been one of the toughest challenges for me as a writer and artist, and for many reasons which I'll get into. And well, the first thing was, as I started the story, initially it was supposed to be one issue, just a straight up Halloween special that didn't really matter at all with towards the story being canon in the official story or anything like that. However, after I sat down and developed the story more, I realized we could actually do a lot better with this story and actually make it canon to the series, and actually have a pretty awesome ending by the end of it that basically what started out as what was just going to be a Halloween comic special has now been sort of a reintroduction for certain characters that have been lost to the story throughout the years as I was developing the comic, developing the story. Just unrealized ideas, old drawings, or characters that haven't been seen, since the first comics I did that were badly drawn from the old paint program from, the 90s paint program. You know the one I'm talking about. So, the thing is, one of the other toughest challenge for me, especially in book number 1 and also in book number 2, I'm actually continuing this strategy now, was actually trying to make my comic book look interesting enough for the reader to want to continue reading. The biggest problem I had with all my other comic books that I've done up until this point is that I went by instinct. I would draw it completely out of my head by instinct, and sometimes I would cheat and I would use the copy and paste tool, like a lot. So for a lot of the comic, a lot of the pages essentially looked the same, and the characters always stood in their same expressions, not really moving much. Like, there'd be like different text dialogue, maybe the background will be different, but essentially the characters would all just stand there in their same sort of phrases. And back when I did action bits in my comics, I used to find ways to end things without needing to really make the characters move necessarily all that much. So I wanted to change that when I started this Agent I Hacked series. So I've actually really gotten into starting using other, finding references for poses and action poses, which you can easily find on the internet, no problem. And things like that. So some fighting stances, even how some martial art techniques are done, how they look in a still photo, things like that could help my action scenes, and also how the characters are moving and how I can use movement to sort of express how some of my characters are feeling, because after all, some of them wear masks and helmets and stuff, so you can't use facial expressions on them to really express their mood. You need to use their actions, their movements to really tell what it is they're feeling. And of course what's written in the speech bubble, but it is always those dramatic poses and actions that a character takes that also keeps us glued to the page. So I really wanted to really start bringing that out, especially in my new comics and new stories, starting with this one. So I suspect people will see things a lot differently than what they used to see with my artwork. The action scenes, I believe, will look better. They'll look proper. They'll look like characters fighting each other, and as well as other sort of things. I'm not really discussing much what's going on in the comic. You can sort of see and read this context for yourself, what's going on here. I'm basically just openly discussing what it was like going through this and creating all this. And as I develop the story, I'm the kind of storyteller that tells the story as I go. sort of. I don't have a big plan all written out necessarily, and I'll just keep going until I get to my ending, which gave me basically the opportunity to sort of start the process of reintroducing some old characters that I used to draw in my from my old stories, from the first issues I've done, like I said. So ultimately what starts off is Agent I having his brain literally blown up at the start of the comic, and ultimately his body being hacked by the very same scientist who built the technology that resurrected his body originally. I thought it was a pretty cool concept, a pretty cool beginning to this arc. So it ultimately takes Agent I out as the hero, and we actually get to see him at his most ruthless and dangerous. And the worst part is, technically, he's not the one doing it. It's, you know, him being programmed by the very nanobots that restore his body, that this guy has hacked his way back into. And quite honestly, a lot of secrets from Agent I's past, as well as Benson's past, are actually revealed in this issue. Why Benson tried to kill Agent I, aka Vincent Craig, all those years ago. What is it about the FATE that Benson hated so much that he betrayed them? A lot of that is revealed in this story, and so with that in mind, it was just an opportunity to introduce a horror-themed global threat that could bring other characters together, because ultimately Benson's left having to recruit the lowest of the low to fight with him to stop the FATE, because technically the FATE's been taken over by a madman who's basically killed off the FATE and reprogrammed them as his mindless slaves, basically. So okay, so now I am discussing the plot. So basically, it's basically we're rooting for the bad guys in this one, and Benson. We get a bit more of a depth and understanding of Benson, as well as reintroducing of characters that I had ideas with that I didn't get to use fully, like Man Mime. People probably don't remember Man Mime from the first Agent I comics I did. He was a crime boss who wore a mime mask, and yeah, he was a very imperfect idea. Like, the original Man Mime used to talk and everything like that. Well, we've changed him up quite a bit in the next story as we get into issue 2, which you'll see that when that's all finished and ready to come out. I'll be doing another discussion video like this. And I feel, as I look back on the first issue, it's been very rewarding. I find that this is the best artwork I've ever done. And, you know, it's been thanks to me, you know, putting the effort in, actually looking at different poses and things to pose my characters, especially to express their emotions and things in it. And I feel, as I look back at my comic, it looks like, you know, there actually is something going on this time, just not characters standing in different backgrounds in the same exact position, talking for a little bit, and somehow the problem being solved without them really moving. You know, it happened a lot in the Sorrow comics, because, well, Sorrow doesn't necessarily have to move in and grab someone to stop him. His eyes pretty much got a flash and their heads blow up. If they've been naughty, bad people full of sin, that is. And every time I drew combat action scenes on my own without references, looking how fight scenes are actually done, what fight moves actually look like, going, you know, by instinct, it would always come out wrong. Sometimes the one character would be too short while the other character is actually supposed to be shorter than he is too big, you know, little mistakes like that. So I think it actually is very important to use poses as a reference, just to at the very least make sure that when you draw your character that your figures are right. How you draw your figures are right. So your character's head isn't too big, or his body is too long and lengthy and his head's too small. Like, I remember trying to draw this big really bulky, muscly like character. He had this really big body, but his head was like the size of a peanut because of my mistake. And that's what happens when you don't use references. Of course, you can be a real talented drawer and actually not have to use poses, and kudos to them. However, if you're not the best artist in the world and you're trying to get that really good look for your comic book, you definitely want to try and looking at poses and using poses as a reference. You know, you can get those figure things when you're posing, when you draw to do poses for you when you're drawing manga. You know, those sort of wooden figure things if you're drawing manga. But there are plenty of other poses and things like that you can use over the internet. A good thing about poses is that because it's a human movement, no one can actually copyright it. So don't be afraid to use poses and think, you know, you're going to get in trouble for it. You legally cannot get in trouble for it if you draw a character in a certain pose, because you cannot copyright a pose. It's a human movement. So a bit of a art tip for you as going through the discussion. So really, ultimately, the series so far, it's been a lot of fun to do, and it's been really fun reintroducing a lot of my old characters, bringing them into the story, and officially making them canon in my comics. Because there was so many ideas. The only problem was all the series and different projects I was coming up with to try to keep up with all the ideas. So now that I'm only doing Agent I and Sorrow, and they're both, you know, technically part of the same series, I can use all my ideas and bring them in as the one series, instead of trying to do a million different ones. And basically, all I could say is, well, what to expect. Well, if you've read part 1, or if you read it for free or bought it online, if you read Agent I Hacked issue 1, basically you get a rough idea what to expect. A lot of carnage, a lot of mayhem, characters dying left, right and center, and the dead rising. Definitely worthy of a Halloween special. And well, with part 2, it's basically going to be mostly focusing on Benson recruiting his army of bad guys for the final showdown with the FATE, Dr. Transin Markovich, the antagonist of this miniseries, and ultimately trying to stop the good doctor from turning the world into a living undead nightmare. Or rather, a reanimated nightmare where everyone is basically controlled by him, just so they could have total security on planet Earth. Not really a life worth living when you think about it. So, ultimately, for issue 2, it's basically about reintroducing some of the old characters, especially some of the old bad guys I come up with, and reintegrating them into this series, officially making them canon, and so Benson has some playmates who can join him for the big final battle in this miniseries. And more on that when I continue the discussion in part 2, because you are going to want to hear about how I came up with some of the concepts that I'm using in part 2. Alright, so with that done, I'm signing off. Thank you guys for joining me. And well, if you enjoyed the video and you want to support the comic, you can definitely buy a digital copy in the link in the description below, as well as there's also links to free versions of the comics, and you'll find it somewhere in the RM Multiverse series, which you'll find in the To Pass section in the link below. Find RM Multiverse, it's the latest episode on there. You'll find Agent I Hacked Part 1. You can read it for free there. Anyways, this is DB Wright, aka Ryan Murray, signing off. I'll be back again next time.